What celebrity did bad things but everyone forgot what they did because they're famous? Floyd Mayweather beats his wife with hands that are registered as lethal weapons in front of his children, but because he wins nobody cares. This one doesn't get nearly enough attention. There was even a video of him knocking her cool TF out and dragging her out of her elevator. Frick that guy. Jimmy Superfly Snuka killed his girlfriend and got inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Kurt Cobain's mother regularly goes on talk shows and interviews where she talks about how supportive she was of Kurt and how she knew how famous he would become from the moment she heard his music. Yup, it's the same mom that abused Kurt and kicked him out multiple times, making him live at his grandparents, friends and sometimes, not confirmed, sleep under a bridge. R. Kelly married Aaliyah when she was 15 years old in the mid-90s, and yet it took like 2 decades for people to start boycotting him as a carnal abuser. He was still making songs with Beyonce and Lady Gaga etc. for a long time. Boondocks made a whole episode about the apathy around trying to convict him. This may not be the best place for but the Watergate scandal was about a rigged election, not just a piddling cover-up of a minor crime. The story is usually told from the viewpoint of the investigation, so facts are revealed in the order in which they came to light, not the order in which they happened, which makes it easy to forget the fricked up nature of the actual crimes. The break-in that got busted was a minor mission in the scheme to rig the 1972 Democratic primary. In fact, it's been estimated to be about the 6th time they had broken into the DNC offices. The goal of that particular break-in was to repair a bugging device that had been placed at a previous beacon and had stopped working. The creep had gone so far as to plant Nixon loyalists in the DNC. The objective was to discredit Ed Muskie, the early Democratic front-runner who was destroying Nixon in the polls. Nixon wanted to run against McGovern, a far-left fringe Democratic who was essentially unelectable. Muskie's campaign limo driver was a Nixon plantant who was leaking intel from overheard conversations. Other staff reproduced confidential documents and handed them over to the White House. This was electoral fraud on a wholesale level. He got busted for a cover-up related to a minor break-in, but in fact a very real, massive conspiracy was in wide operation that gets more or less glossed over in the retelling. Rick James kidnapped 2 women with his wife while on separate crack binges and tortured them for days on end. Vince Neil was driving drunk and caused a crash that killed his passenger. The passenger was the drummer for Hanoi Rocks, another band that was outing with Mötley Crüe. Ted Nugent crap his pants to dodge the draft and has a song called Jailbait which ends with him pleading with an officer not to arrest him and instead share a 13-year-old. That's not even his worst offense, as also he adopted his 16-year-old girlfriend because the government refused to marry them. Johnny Cash walked out on his wife and kids saying that his career was more important to him than they were, then went on to eventually settle down with June Carter and start a whole new family while still ignoring the kids he already had. I'm pretty sure they made a whole movie about this. Boy George, he beat a guy with a metal chain after cuffing him to a radiator. Should make for an interesting sequence in his forthcoming biopic. Dang, sentenced to 15 months, was let go after 4 months for good behavior. I guess he was a man without conviction. Steven Tyler became the guardian for a 16-year-old he was dating when he was 25 so he could bring her on tour, knocked her up too, and dropped her off back home pregnant at 17 and addicted to H and disappeared. Piers Morgan was the editor of the Daily Mirror during the Iraq War, published photos that he knew were fake of American and British troops abusing Iraqi prisoners. He was fired but somehow managed to make a successful media career out of it. Jimmy Page was 26 when he started calling 14-year-old Lori Maddox his girlfriend. Mick Jagger had a few rounds with Maddox around the same time. Also of the Rolling Stones, Bill Wyman started dating 13-year-old Mandy Smith when he was 47. He got her mother's permission. Steven Tyler convinced the mother of 16-year-old Julia Holcomb to make him her legal guardian, then snorted blow from next to her hospital bed while she was having an abortion. David Bowie, the beloved, managed to get Lori Maddox's virginity and got her to bring her 15-year-old friend along, in addition to many other underage girls. Jerry Lee Lewis of course married his 13-year-old cousin. She still believed in Santa on their honeymoon. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll himself, was routinely in trouble with underage girls, and even the fabled romance with Priscilla is a tale of physical interference. She was 14 when they met. Chuck Berry was arrested for crossing state lines with a 14-year-old prostitute. He was also recording women in the washroom of the restaurant he owned. Courtney Love says she gave Ted Nugent a BJ when she was 12. He also adopted a 17-year-old so he could bang her without getting charged with kidnapping. He even wrote a song about avoiding Chili P charges. Anthony Kiedis, Red Hot Chili Peppers, wrote songs about it too. Catholic schoolgirl's rule is about his hooking up with a 14-year-old at 23. Iggy Pop also wrote songs about sleeping with 13-year-olds too. Check out the lyrics to Look Away. Marvin Gaye knocked up his wife's 15-year-old niece. Don Henley, the Eagles, was charged after paramedics found him with two naked girls, aged 15 and 16. Victor Salva, director, violated a 13-year-old boy while he was directing a movie the kid was in. A movie which was nominated for a few awards, in fact. Had a bunch of child pee too. Went to jail, and almost as soon as he gets out he starts working on powder. George Wallace, the infamous pro-segregation governor of Alabama in the 60s, did not inform his wife that her doctor diagnosed her with cancer. Doctors during this time often told patients' relatives of their cancer diagnosis instead of the patient, especially if the patient was female. The reason was that she was running for governor as a surrogate for him since he had reached his term limits, and he thought that the diagnosis would negatively affect her chances of winning. She ended up finding out about it 4 years later during a visit to a gynecologist, but unfortunately the cancer had progressed to the point that she died from it 3 years after learning that she had cancer and that her husband had known about it. He ended up successfully getting the term limits repealed and went on to serve a few more terms as governor. People forget about this, I'm assuming, because of all of the other crappy things he did. Holy crap. Jared Leto's been accused of debauchery by half a dozen 13-15 years old girls. He kinda comes off a bit as a tool, kinda acts douchish and arrogant. I have heard that before though. Karl Malone got a 13-year-old pregnant and refused to take care of that child. Drake seems to be ignored for grooming a young underage fan, at age 14, into being his girlfriend until she recently turned 18 this year, and now he's even, supposedly, doing it to a young actress. For some reason he gets more flack for being a big basketball fan than he does for the blatant grooming. Gwyneth Paltrow, she's a con artist and manages a MLM, as well as recommending women treat their illness by putting rocks up their twats and steaming their privates, causing harm to people. You can say she's an idiot, or just that she's a sociopath that loves making money off hurting other people. She admitted on Jimmy Kimmel that she has no idea if anything really works. Steven Tyler was a serial rapist in the 70s and 80s. Now he's an old woman. He also became the legal guardian of a 14-year-old groupie so he could take her on tour and frick her. Not sure what her parents were thinking. In my country there is a TV host that killed several people in a car accident. Twice. It was his fault both times. You can still see him on TV. I mean, it seems to most that Drake is actively grooming young girls, but it seems to be forgotten as soon as new evidence surfaces. Emma Roberts beat the crap out of her then boyfriend Evan Peters, then continued to co-star in the same show as him. This one always bothered me. She bit his face. They stayed together and did the show, but nobody seemed to think the domestic violence was a big deal just because Peters didn't leave her. There's a soccer player in Brazil who killed his wife, quartered her body and gave it to dogs eat. To make it harder to police found out. He went to jail for a few years and now he is paying again and making tons of money again like nothing happened. Creed Bratton has been a leader and a follower of numerous cults. You make more money as a leader, but it's more fun to be a follower. There was that time James Franco tried to frick a teenager after she posted the exchange on social media of her telling him how old she was and him not caring and still wanting to see her. All he had to do was go on a few morning talk shows a couple days later and say, "You don't always know who you're talking to online," and everyone instantly forgot about it. He framed it like he was the one who was deceived and people just let it slide even though that clearly wasn't the case. Dr. Dre beat a reporter, D. Barnes, savagely for writing a negative story on him, or one he perceived as negative. I don't know. He picked her up by her hair and began slamming her head and the right side of her body repeatedly against a brick wall near the stairway as his bodyguard held off the crowd with a gun. After Dr. Dre tried to throw her down the stairs and failed, he began kicking her in the ribs and hands. She escaped and ran into the women's restroom. Dr. Dre followed her and grabbed her from behind by the hair again and proceeded to punch her in the back of the head. He and Eminem would go on to joke about it as the man who slapped D. Barnes. Dr. Dre produced and is featured in rapper Eminem's song Guilty Conscience, in which Eminem references the incident as a humorous put down. Dre reportedly fell out of his chair laughing at it. Guess Redditors forgot about Dre. Jerry Seinfeld dated a 17-year-old girl in high school when he was 39 years old. I know it isn't illegal. He had money, fame, and was at the height of his show, and he chooses to date a 17-year-old who is still in high school. It might not be illegal and as bad as murder, debauchery, kidnapping, etc., but it's still pretty scummy. Comedians in cars picking up their girlfriends from high school. Charlie Sheen once fricked his girlfriends, plural, unprotected when he has HIV. Coco Chanel was a Nazi. Tyler Tequila is a Nazi. I haven't heard the name Tyler Tequila in almost a decade. Will Smith was in YouTube Rewind 2018. Mark Butt Brownlee. Mr. Mossaby from Sweet Life of Zack and Cody killed someone in a drunk driving accident. Phil Lewis is unlike many of the others on this thread in that he was sincerely remorseful for his actions. The comedy troupe that he created helped spread awareness of the dangers of drunk and reckless driving, and that helped play a role in his reduced sentence. People can change with reflection, introspection, and genuine remorse for their wrongdoings, and he seems like a very good representation of that. For the record, Phil Lewis is very remorseful about what happened, and, to this day, he continues to work with drug abuse recovery groups and talk about his experience. Rick James. He and his girlfriend literally kidnapped someone and burned them with their crack pipe and physically abused her, but people just want to go Rick James B. To be fair, people say Rick James B more because they like Dave Chappelle, not because they're big Rick James fans. Pete Townsend of The Who and Child P. No, you don't understand. He was just doing research on it. I see people still saying great things about Tom Cruise all the time, especially on our movies. It's like they forgot he's huge into Scientology. You know, that fricked up group that locks people up in compounds until they conform, that group that has gotten away with debauchery and murder, that group that skirts taxes with their Bulls church status, the group that intimidates and ruins lives that go against them. It's a huge frickin' evil cult. He's a very big part of it, and yet people seem okay with him. I guess Noon's really forgotten, but Roman Polanski is still getting awards and standing ovations for his films. Something interesting I read once, and I could be wrong, is that a lot of the people, including the celebrities, who support him thought it was just rape because she was 13, and that if she was say 18 it wouldn't have been, not understanding that it would have been rape no matter how old she was. Mark Wahlberg beat and blinded a Vietnamese guy just because he was Vietnamese. Also this, in June 1986, Wahlberg and 3 friends chased after 3 black children while yelling kill the N and throwing rocks at them. The next day, Wahlberg and others followed a group of schoolchildren taking a field trip on a beach, yelled racial epithets at them, threw rocks at them, and summoned other white males who joined in the harassment. Newt Gingrich, Republican politician, married his high school geometry teacher when he was 19 and she was 26, had multiple affairs, and while she was in the hospital undergoing treatment for cancer he came into her hospital room and told her he was divorcing her. Friends of Gingrich report that Newt told them that she wasn't pretty enough to be the wife of a president, which he planned to be. He proceeds to divorce her, and then doesn't pay child support, and first wife has to get help from the church to make ends meet. I say first wife because he gets his divorce and in 6 months marries his second wife. But while with second wife has an affair with his staffer. During this affair, the massive hypocrite leads the impeachment proceedings of Bill Clinton for lying about an affair. Gets divorced and 4 months later marries his latest wife. He also blamed past infidelities on his passion for this country. Oh, and he is credited with driving a wedge between the parties in politics and being a leader in Christian family values. You can currently find him as a popular pundit on news programs. John Lennon beat his wife. He yelled in his son's ear so loudly that he's now deaf in it. A child. I think you'll know the song Despacito, who is performed by Luis Fonsi. Well, this little piece of crap was married to a beautiful woman who had breast cancer. During her entire process of chemo he wasn't there, and he even told her, when she had a breast removed, that he didn't want her as a woman. This ended up in a divorce. From what I've heard, that's sadly common. Many breast cancer survivors with mastectomies have been left by husbands who thought them less of a woman's on one or both breasts. Ryan Reynolds did Green Lantern. I can't help but feel Deadpool was an incredibly cathartic role for him. Everyone's celebrity hero Bill Murray allegedly beat his wife, repeatedly, up until his wife divorced him in 2007. Also was on the list of celebrities that visited Epstein's Island with the weird temple and crap. John Landis killed 3 people. Gandhi turned down life-saving medicine for his wife because he didn't believe in it, but when he got the same ailment after she died he took it immediately. Natalie Wood was probably murdered by Robert Wagner and witnessed by Christopher Walken. Walken was on the boat, but I don't think he actually saw it happen as he went to bed before everyone else did. Former NFL player Ray Lewis was probably involved in a murder, but after he improbably became one of the faces of the NFL, with tons of endorsements for stuff like Chunky Soup, seen as a sort of lovable tough guy. To quote John Mulaney, I'm not saying Ray Lewis stabbed a man, I'm saying Ray Lewis was within stabbing distance of a man who was stabbed. Wesley Snipes, he is a real dong and assaulted Halle Berry. You have been visited by the distinguished doggo of delicious delicacies. Comment tasty supper, pupper, and be blessed with delectable dishes for the next decade. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.